So what would you say your philosophy on nutrition is?
Phew. I got very interested in nutrition back in the early days when I was working with Tom Platz, the great bodybuilder.
Right, the squatting machine.
Yeah, he was also a pretty good squatter. He actually had the temerity to try to beat me at squatting one day over in Germany. I don't know if you ever heard about that little scenario.
I heard about that, yeah.
It was funny. He actually out-squatted me for reps. He had tremendous anaerobic threshold.
Yeah.
He wasn't able to come close to me in total poundage. Anyway, I noticed with Tom that he dieting down for a competition, he'd be real good with his diet and very meticulous and so forth for like 3 or 4 days. But then he'd get crazy. He'd like go crazy from ketosis more often than not, eating only protein and no carbs and stuff. And he'd go crazy and he'd eat Twinkies or Pop-Tarts. That was his favorite, his Pop-Tarts. But he grew and grew in the final stages, and he became more and more shredded. And I'm saying to myself, there's something there. So I began looking at it carefully. And over the years, this was back in the 70s and 80s, I began to develop a system of nutrition, which I later dubbed zigzag nutrition or zigzag dieting, where you would never eat for what you just did. You would only eat for what you were about to do. It's like putting gas in your car before the trip. You can't take a trip and expect to put gas in it after because you don't have enough gas to make the trip.
Wow, that's a good point.
You put gas in the car first, and then you make the trip. And there were basically 5 rules. You got to eat 5 times a day, or 6. Most bodybuilders know that instinctively. I never really had to teach that to anybody, but you get the idea that young babies cry about once every 2.5 hours or so for food. That's because that's about how long it takes for food to get through their system, and now they're hungry again, their blood sugar drops, and they want to eat again. So babies are taken care of by their mothers to eat 5, 6, 7 times a day, 8 times a day even.
Okay.
Bodybuilders learned that secret a long, long time ago, and it's very important. Now, each meal has to be balanced in protein, fats, and carbohydrates. You can't just eat anything you want. So I developed what we call the 1-2-3 rule. And 1, 2, 3 are not holy numbers. It just gives you a guideline to understand that you keep your fat low, your carbohydrates moderate, and get plenty of protein, all 5 meals of the day. And if you're going to be sitting around doing nothing, you reduce the carbohydrate intake before your quiescent period. If you're going to be working out, then you take in more carbohydrate. But you leave your fats and your proteins alone because they're pretty constant. And then the 5th and final rule involved nutrition. I don't care how good a cook you are or how good a cook your mama was. There's no such thing as a balanced meal. So you have to use nutritional supplements. Furthermore, there are several nutritional supplements out there which we call nutritional supplements that are not really nutritional in nature, but they're ergogenic in nature. And some of these supplements are really, really powerful. All I have to do is mention a few. Creatine monohydrate, for example. You can't ignore supplements like these because they give you an edge, and they work fine. Anyway, that's my basic insight on nutrition. You've got to do it very carefully and very programmatically based upon how often and how hard you work out.
Now, when you were getting ready for a meet, did you change anything as far as your nutrition?
Bear in mind that powerlifters always have to make weight. Right. So I would train like 3% above my competition body weight, and in the 11th hour drop 6, 7 pounds, 8 pounds, whatever it was. So yeah, nutrition is very important for any athletes who have to make weight. You got to make sure that you don't lose too much lean mass, or you don't get yourself into such a low energy situation that it's going to take you a day or two or more to recover. So you very programmatically cut down your calories without reducing your intake of protein, and not so severely that you end up losing a lot of muscle mass. It's got to be done carefully over a period of time in a zigzag fashion. Eat more when you're going to work out, eat less when you're not. And in that way, you can actually reduce body fat and increase muscle mass at the same time you're losing total body weight. It's a revolutionary concept that nobody had ever heard of.
Right. Now, when you're getting ready for a meet, what did it look like as far as training, but also mental prep? I know mental, your mind plays a big role. How did that look like?
Well, my background, my doctorate is in the field of psychology. Okay. So I spent a lot of time with visualization training, biofeedback training, and the such. And over the years, I kind of weeded out the things that I didn't think were effective or worth my time. And I ended up just doing visualization training, doing each lift over and over in my mind so that I was able to do each lift perfectly. And part of that biofeedback training was to take weights off the rack. They were much, much heavier than I could voluntarily do on my own. For example, if I was squatting 1,000 pounds, I would take 1,100 pounds off the rack and just hold it. And that biofeedback allowed me to accept 1,000 pounds with much greater ease later on, because my body was geared to handle it, and it didn't feel heavy on me.
Okay, yeah, I remember actually Jeff telling me about that. Yeah.
You call that overloads.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, very interesting. Now, did you? I know in your video, there's a video on your website where you talk about every night before you went to bed, you would literally go through the workout you had previously done. When did you pick that up?
Well, that was part of my visualization training. It wasn't just the 3 lifts that I went over and over in my mind. It was everything that I had done. Could I have done it better? And then I would imagine myself doing it better, and I would do it better in my mind. Okay. And so that, tend to reduce the number of silly mistakes, lapses in concentration, and things like that.
Okay. And
I had been doing that right from the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, very effective. Now, what equipment did you use in your training as far as chains, bands, belt, wraps?
Yeah. It's funny, everybody talks about chains and bands nowadays as though it were some kind of new big secret, coming out of the Fifth Street Gym or whatever they call it.
Oh, right.
The truth is that we were messing around with that stuff back in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that kind of training has been around for quite some time, and the theory behind it was no different then than it is now. The chains, of course, increase the amount of weight you're lifting as you as you come closer to lockout, because you're lifting more of the chain, and it's a form of isokinetic training. That is to say, trying to vary the amount of weight that you're moving in such a way that you're moving at the same rate of speed regardless of whether you're at the beginning or at the end of a movement. In other words, isokinetic means same speed. That's what that word means. And you do that by varying the weight. Nowadays, there are much more effective ways of controlling speed than through the use of chains or bands. And it surprises me that Louis Simmons and all of the other fellas that he's trained, and various other people nowadays who use chains and bands, haven't discovered it That stuff has been around for years and years ago, and you can still buy it on the internet. A company by the name of Minigym used to manufacture a machine that was isokinetic in nature, and I used that very extensively in my training back in the old days because it teaches speed. It teaches great speed, strength, explosive power. And that's something that most lifters never learn. They push the weight just hard enough to move it. I pushed the weight much, much harder than I had to in order to move it. Okay. Every inch of the way, except right near lockout, where you want to back off so you don't jar yourself. Another piece of machinery that I use that hasn't, even to this day, gained widespread acceptance is a safety squat bar.
Oh, yes.
You know, when you're squatting with a regular straight bar all the time, you're asking for trouble. You're putting undue pressure on your low back, and that's really unnecessary. It's almost like counterproductive. So you can take all of that pressure off by using a cambered bar, which we call the safety squat bar. It became known over the years as a Hatfield bar because I used it and I wrote articles about it and so forth back in those days. But the safety squat bar was a very big and important piece of equipment for me because I didn't want to get injured. And, you know, if you check the record, I've had a few minor injuries over the years that I competed, but nothing so great as many athletes. I can't tell you how many guys that I know whose careers were ended because of blown out backs or knees. It's just, it's like disgusting, and it hurts. Not in a physical sense, but, you know, I feel sorry for those guys who never really were able to show what they were capable of doing because they were silly and stupid.
Now, with the safety bar, how you wouldn't train with that leading up to a meet, though, right?
Oh no! Right before a competition, I would switch back to a regular bar, just to make sure that I had my groove and make sure that you know, I was acclimated to the different feel.
Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. I didn't realize powerlifters use that. I had heard of them and I've seen them, the Hatfield bars, but yeah. Click here for part 3 of the Fred Hatfield interview.